When Hitler invaded Poland in September of 1939, the whole world shook in terror as the Second World War was declared, the very war that humanity had sworn years prior that there would never be another like the first one. And yet it happened, the deadliest conflict in world history that saw the deaths of more innocent civilians than the soldiers fighting the war. In this week's video, I will be addressing a certain topic that is related to my home country during this time of turmoil. I was born in Romania, and what if I said something controversial like, this small and insignificant country actually brought the downfall of the Nazi regime? If you're interested in finding out how that came about, then keep on watching. Disclaimer. In order to avoid self-plagiarizing, it is honorable to mention that the content of this video actually comes from an essay that I wrote for one of my college classes. In said essay, I argued the following thesis. Romania played an important role during the Second World War for both the Axis powers and the Allies. How did that happen? In order to answer that question, this video will be divided into 3 sections. First, I will give some background information regarding the First World War and how the Second World War began. Secondly, I will discuss Romania's contribution on the side of the Axis. And thirdly, I will finish on how Romania joined the Allies and how the Second World War ended. During the First World War, Romania had fought with the Entente, which included Russia, France, and Great Britain, against the Triple Alliance that included Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. The Kingdom of Romania during this time successfully gained new territories that were Transylvania, Bessarabia, and Bukovina after the collapse of the Austria-Hungary and Russian empires. Then, in April of 1939, the news was spread that British statesman Neville Chamberlain and his cabinet would no longer hold a policy of appeasement towards Hitler, and that Britain would defend Poland against any threat from Germany to ensure peace in Europe. When Hitler crossed into Poland on September of 1939, Britain and France demanded his withdrawal while fighting him at the same time, thus starting the Second World War. The creation of Greater Romania after World War I saw the political system become heavily corrupted, and the Iron Guard, which was Romania's fascist party financed by the Nazis, forced King Carol II to abdicate on September 6, 1940, because he was seen as, quote, a weakling dominated by his Jewish whore, his mistress, end quote. Thus, the party swore they would, quote, rid the country of her and every Jew, end quote. Furthermore, the secret protocol to the Russo-German Pact of 1939, along with the Second Vienna Accords of August 1940, led Hitler to urge the annexation of many Romanian territories. Most of these territories went to the Soviets, especially the Bessarabia Strip and Bukovina, whereas northern Transylvania went to Hungary. After September of 1940, Hitler took the role of protector of the shattered remnants of the Romanian territories. General Ion Antonescu, who became the prime minister after King Carol II, had been placed as the dictator of Romania with the Nazis' aid, and in return, Antonescu offered military support if there were to be a war between Germany and Russia. Thus, while still hesitant, Romania officially joined the Axis powers on November 23, 1940, because they believed that by providing Germany with the necessary oil that they needed, Germany would in return take care of the Soviet threat and have them return the annexed provinces. With this support, Antonescu hoped to recover Bessarabia, northern Bukovina, some of Transylvania, and the Transnistrian regions. The Forțele Aeriene Regale ale României, or FAR for short, which translate to the Royal Romanian Air Force, were trained and reorganized along the German lines by the Luftwaffe advisors. Romania participated in Operation Barbarossa, which was the invasion of the Soviet Union orchestrated by the Germans. According to author Gerald D. Swick, the following quote argues Romania's Air Force importance. Quote, "Far fighters and bombers aided the Romanian army's victories against the Soviets in Bessarabia and at Odessa in 1941, losing 862 men in less than 10 months, including ground support and anti-aircraft crews. Romanian pilots flew some 4,000 Surites in the Battle of Stalingrad from October 1942 to January 1943. End quote. However, Romania's most influential factor for Germany was its immense oil fields at Ploiești, in which the joint German-Romanian air defense was successful in fending off Soviet attempts to bomb the refineries, shooting down a total of 81 Soviet aircrafts by October of 1941. Starting on June 12, 1942, during Operation Halpro, U.S. bombers targeted Romania's oil fields at Ploiești. This operation was a failure because the bad weather conditions caused the pilots' bombings to be dropped inaccurately on the targets, and as a result, little to no damage was done on the refineries. On August 1, 1943, during Operation Tidal Wave, 178 unescorted American B-24 heavy bombers swept over Ploiești at low level, and FAR pilots took down 20 raiders out of 54. This made the FAR's top priority to defend the oil fields. During this operation, American bombers targeted 9 major refineries at Ploiești that produced about 90% of the entire oil production. However, they only eliminated about 46% of total annual production. Despite the preaching that the American pilots received, the attack was arguably considered a failure because the losses were merely temporary, as the Germans quickly repaired and restored the production of the refineries. By 1943, the Ploiești works and the storage facilities were, quote, among the most heavily defended targets in Europe, end quote. We can then conclude that Germany benefited from Romania's aid in terms of providing Romanian pilots to the Nazis as well as the Ploiești territory that was heavily saturated in oil. The following quote summarizes this fairly well. Quote, Romania provided more troops to the German cause than all other Axis satellites combined, and more than 1.2 million Romanian men served under arms by mid-1944. End quote. Romanian professor and rector Dr. Ioan Aurel Pop gives an explanation on how the end of the Second World War can be directly linked to an important turning point. On August 23, 1944, Romania came out of the Axis Pact and joined the Allies not long after. This event is known as King Michael's coup, and it was heard on the radio by the Romanian nation and army that night, that is, August 23, 1944. The professor argued that the king's decision was agreed upon by both Romanian officials and the public opinion because they felt Romania lost too many lives on the Eastern Front and that they were fighting a cause that was no longer in their interest. An original Romanian newspaper called Universul, dating back to that time, published an article on August 25, 1944, just 2 days after the radio announcement, that included the original message broadcasted on the radio by King Michael himself. One part of his speech mentioned that how after a hard-thought agreement, it was decided to save Romania from catastrophe by leaving the Axis and joining the Allies. There were also the unilateral ceasefire from Romania against the United Nations. After changing sides, quote, the FAR pilots flew 4,300 missions for the Allies and dropped over 1,000 tons of bombs on its erstwhile Axis partners, end quote. The decision to leave the Axis was terrible news for Germany. Another section from the newspaper contains the following quote, quote, defecțiunea României face ca Germania să piardă pentru totdeauna petrolul de la Ploiești și acesta tocmai atunci când tancurile și avioanele germane sunt handicapate de lipsa carburanților. End quote. The following is an English translation. Quote, Romania's defection will translate in the complete loss of access to oil in Ploiești at a time when German tanks and planes suffer tremendously because of the lack of fuel. End quote. We can thus understand how this terrible decision heavily affected German weapons due to the lack of oil for their fuel, a problem that quickly led to their demise. This saw the surrender of 7,000 German soldiers who had heavy weaponry in Bucharest after the coup was broadcasted on the radio. Then, the Allies came to help the Romanians, and together they kicked out all the German forces out of Romanian territory in roughly 10 days. To conclude, while the decision to join the Allies was not the only factor to cause the demise of Germany, it is still nonetheless an important part in the history of the Second World War. Despite its small size as a country, Romania proved to be a beneficial force in terms of air force and natural resources for Nazi Germany that allowed them many successes at the beginning of the war. When King Michael declared that he would take Romania out of the Axis, it seemed to be the final straw for Germany. The lack of oil was a major drawback because they could no longer fuel their machineries to fully function. Not only that, but the Allies fighting side by side with the Romanian soldiers saw an increase in their force to take down Germany once and for all. This is all I have for you today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys!